Thanks for joining us on What Matters This Week. I'm Lauren Maloney. I am joined this Sunday by Mourning Fox, who is the new Director of Mental Health Programs for the Department of Public Safety, the Vermont State Police. You said I could call you Fox. How does that sound?
Works for me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it.
This is the first position of its kind for the state of Vermont. So maybe my first question is, why now?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons for why now. I would have loved to have had this happen a year ago or 5 years ago, and I would be happy if it happened 5 years from now, as long as it's happening. The reality is this type of work is really important. There are little pockets of this type of work, of how law enforcement responds to people who are in a crisis, and it just seemed, I think from Commissioner Sherling's perspective, now is the time we really need to organize this and really have someone in a position that can help oversee kind of the rollout of some of these changes. Last year, the legislature approved funds for the Department of Public Safety to have embedded workers in all of the barracks. And so I think that impetus and that ability to do that really helped to say we need to have a position, within Department of Public Safety that helps oversee that, as well as the commissioner, when talking to me about the position, helping the Department of Public Safety, Vermont State Police, really reimagine how they deliver their services to Vermonters.
You've been doing this work for about 25 years now. 25 years now. You were the deputy commissioner for the State Department of Mental Health. So you would describe this as a natural fit.
It's a great fit for me. As you mentioned, I was the deputy commissioner for Department of Mental Health for 4.5 years, with the department for close to 8 years. I've been in the mental health field for 25 years, but pretty much of the 25 years or so of my mental health career, 24.5 of that, I've really focused on my work with the intersection of mental health and law enforcement. I've worked on kind of the back end, where I've run maximum security forensic facilities for people who have been adjudicated by the courts as either not competent to stand trial or not guilty by reason of insanity. Mm-hmm. And I've done work on the front end, working and training officers throughout New England around crisis negotiating, hostage negotiating, verbal de-escalation, violence prevention, things of that sort. And so for me to come into this role, for me it's the epitome of the work that I've been doing for 25 years. And I'm just really glad to be having this as a focus right now as well.
So that intersection of mental health and public safety, when did it come a critical focus for you over the past several years? Because I know national events have certainly made a bigger focus of this as well.
Sure. There's been numerous conversations over the years, but as I started doing my work as the deputy commissioner and really having a broader perspective of our system and working with the different agencies within state government, that's when I really started to become more acutely aware of how law enforcement responds to people who are having some type of crisis, whether it be a crisis related to a mental illness or addictions or brain injuries, Alzheimer's, dementia, things of that sort, any type of mental impairment, if you will. And so I started to get myself involved, even as deputy, working with sheriff's departments, state police, other local law enforcement agencies. And generally it was more around when things happened, didn't go well, or there was a conflict between maybe the community mental health centers, designated agencies, and local law enforcement, and trying to work on those. One of the best pieces that I really was proud and still am proud to be a part of is the development of the Team 2 curriculum that I was a part of, and I'm still part of the steering committee for that. And Team 2 is a training curriculum that we put together close to 8 years ago that really focuses on helping law enforcement and mental health emergency service workers work better together. And for me, that's kind of the ultimate part of this work is, knowing what are your limitations, what are their limitations, so that everyone kind of knows what you can and can't do when you're on scene, and you're not having to figure that out in the moment.
Yeah.
But having that knowledge base prior.
I wonder if your role then for the department is less reaction, more action.
That's exactly it. Looking to be much more proactive at this point. The commissioner's been very clear that he sees me as, you're the expert on this, you're the one, you need to guide us. And so I feel like I have a great support from the commissioner, the colonel, and the state police and others, and that I have a lot of latitude to really bring in various stakeholders into this conversation so that we can really develop and create a system that works best for Vermont.
I know you have short-term, medium-term, long-term plans.
Yeah.
Let's start with the right now. What are you doing?
Sure. The short-term stuff is really, goes back to what I mentioned earlier about the embedded workers that we received approval to fund last legislative session. There's 10 barracks in the state. We currently have 4 embedded workers hired for those. There are 4 others that are in the kind of the final stages of the interview process. And so we're down to just kind of the last 2 barracks and designated agencies to get those positions filled. And so the short term is get those positions filled, get those folks onboarded, trained, and really start to get out into the field with the troopers.
Is there a playbook or a handbook you're working with?
Beyond what's in my head, a little bit. There's, as I said, there have been some embedded workers throughout the state for a number of years in kind of ad hoc little pockets, and so I'm taking some of the information of how those were organized, how folks were trained, how they were onboarded, things of that sort, and also one thing that I've been doing, myself is I really have kind of done a deep dive into what other states and other nations are doing related to this, and bringing that information to here to help inform how we train folks, how we onboard folks, things like that.
I was going to say, is there a city or a state that you're emulating maybe a little bit when it comes to best practices?
I think what I would like, what my vision is that in the not too distant future, year 2, 3, something down the line, people are looking to Vermont to emulate. Okay. Is really how I see it. I think we have an opportunity to really make that kind of a change. There are programs, there's a program that's out of Eugene, Oregon called Cahoots, which has been around for over 30 years. And that model pairs a social worker with a paramedic to respond to calls. There's models out of Denver that I really find fascinating where they have that type of response, but they also have embedded workers, kind of like what we're developing here now too. And that's really how I see kind of 3 prongs for us going into the future, that we'll have our embedded workers that will respond with troopers or with local law enforcement, that we will have people who are a non-law enforcement, non-armed people who are able to respond, similar to a Cahoots model. And then we're also talking about, no matter how many little teams we have, there's always going to be calls where, hey, that team's busy. And so it comes down to, how do we train all of our troopers to be better able to respond to these types of crises? Not that I'm expecting that troopers are going to hold master's degrees in counseling and psychology and things of that sort, but really more to give them the tool set that they need, and more ongoing training, that it's not part of just an initial course at the academy, but that it's ongoing. I think that verbal skills like this is a perishable skill, just like knowing how to use your tools on your belt as a law enforcement officer. And so we need to put the same kind of focus in our training and recertification yearly into our verbal skills, like we do with using the mechanical tools that we have.
Do you anticipate ever needing yourself to go to a scene?
It's possible, and I put out there that I'm definitely available. As a mental health person and head of different programs over the years, I pretty much have been on call for almost the last 25 years, 24/7. So it's a little weird not to be on call at this time. But I see myself as a resource. And whether I can provide some guidance to someone on the scene, or be on the scene to help out, provide support to a crisis negotiating team or to a mental health crisis specialist who's already there, in a heartbeat. Yeah, I'd have no problem with that.
And would a dispatcher, who would make the call as to
Yeah.
which embed gets sent to which case?
That's a great question. I'm really glad you asked that, because that's one of the most important pieces of this, I think. You know, if I go back to that model in Eugene, the Cahoots model, you know, the statistics I'm a little unclear on, but just in reading some recent information, you know, of several thousand calls in a year that they may go out on, less than a few hundred times have they ever asked for armed backup after they've arrived on a scene. And in the 30 years that they've been doing this, they've never been injured. And so that tells me that the dispatchers there have been trained in such a way so as to know exactly, like, who do we dispatch in this circumstance. And so I think that, to me, is a huge part of how we're going to do this, exactly, is not only the training for troopers, but in the PSAPs and the dispatch centers, those dispatchers having training so that they're very comfortable with, this is who I dispatch, or this is who I dispatch, or this is who I dispatch. You know, they make decisions like that now. I think we'll just be looking at expanding that a little bit. You know, they make a decision, you know, this is a fire and rescue, this is a law enforcement, this is, you know, those types of things. Now we're just going to expand that a little bit, but we have to create those matrices for them to really understand, you know, what type of dispatch, you know, should I be sending on this. But if these other states and other countries have kind of figured that model out, I want to be able to bring that here, and what's going to work for us here with our laws in Vermont, with our geography here, and such like that. So it's a really important piece that you bring up.
Fox, I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
We'll be right back on What Matters This Week.